So there's going to be a reaction to the games, the second slate of games from Wild Card Weekend on Sunday, January 15th. I didn't quite get the time to do in the instant reaction I wanted to do, but better late than never when those games finished yesterday. With the first game yesterday being Dolphins at the Bills. Now, this was probably the heaviest favorite of the whole weekend. In fact, I think it was if you go by the Vegas odds. With the Dolphins starting Skylar Thompson, Bills being at home, Bills being one of the Super Bowl favorites. You would figure this game was going to be a huge blowout. Kind of started in that fashion. The Bills going up 10-0 or something like that. I think maybe it was 17-0. But then, the Dolphins were able to come back in part because of some turnovers that the Bills had. It's been a problem with Josh Allen this year. He has a lot of turnovers. And then in this game, 2 interceptions, I think 3 fumbles. Yeah. And so with that, you knew that in order for the Dolphins to stay in this game or pull off the upset, improbably, they were going to need some help. And the Buffalo definitely gave them more than their share of help. And it was kind of a nip and tuck game back and forth for the final half. Dolphins or the Bills were able to stop the Dolphins on their final fourth down drive. And it really ended up being 4th and 6 at the very end, just because Skylar Thompson inexperience. It was 4th and 1, and then they end up getting it pushed back to 4th and 6, and Bills end up stopping them. Bills ain't got nothing to be super proud of this game. I know the playoffs are survive in advance, like Josh Allen said at the end of the game. But when you're a heavy favorite and you playing an opponent that you should squash with their backup QB, and it just kind of goes down to the wire, and the Dolphins had a more than realistic chance to win that game. I mean, it would have been an epic upset. At work when I was watching it, I had a friend who's a big Bills fan, and she was definitely more than surprised that the game kind of went the way that it did. And the Bills got to clean up their act. They're just not very wasn't a very buttoned up performance by them. And yeah, if they keep that up against against the Bengals or the Chiefs, those Super Bowl aspirations aren't going to go quite in the direction that they would hope. I'd put it that way. As for the Dolphins, great effort by them in this game. But you look to the future, and I always like to have big boy discussions here. I'm telling you, man, with 3 out of 4 seasons, not being able to stay healthy and going back to his college days, of course, in Alabama. Concussion issues. He's a small QB, no athleticism, even though he's kind of a short guy, kind of like Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray. He's just not a runner. I would look elsewhere, and there's plenty of QBs on the market when you're talking about Derek Carr, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, this is a Dolphins team that's ready to win now, and you don't want to waste these prime years of Tyreek Hill and Eric Waddle, especially Tyreek Hill. So I would look elsewhere there if I was the Dolphins. So those are my thoughts on that first game. Now we get to a game that no one really predicted would be a blowout. This is going to be one of the more evenly matched matchups compared to some of the blowouts of sort of the mismatches of this weekend with the Vikings or the Giants at the Vikings. This was a game that actually happened in the same sort of setting and whatnot not too long ago, a few weeks ago, with the Vikings beating the Giants. But this was a game that I think a lot of people were picking the road upset here, quote unquote upset. Just because people were looking at that Vikings defense and just not being very in on it, all the luck they've had and sort of these one-score games, 11-0. That shit was unprecedented. Maybe it was 12-0, either 11-0 or 12-0, something like that. But still, though, I figure that the Giants, not a super experienced team, obviously, when it comes to the playoffs. Offensively, not super dynamic. And I figure the Vikings at home, they got the offensive weapons, all the home crowd, all that kind of shit. They have been good in close score games. I picked them to win this one. Giants, of course, won this one 31-24 in a game that really showcased what's really was the Achilles heel of the Vikings all year. And that was their defense. They just could not stop the Giants at all. Giants pretty much had their way with them. Daniel Jones had the best game of his career, earned himself a lot of money with this game. And it was very impressive by the Giants. It just was just a culmination of just an amazing turnaround they had. They were such a sad sack franchise for the past few years. And then last year, even the owner said, like, yeah, this shit was a low for us. And when you look at how things went for them this season, the turnaround with Brian Dable, it's a super impressive what they were able to do in turning this season around. He's definitely the coach of the year, just the combination of, the coaching, bringing up Daniel Jones, the record turnaround, the team spirit, changing the culture. It's an amazing job. I don't think they have a super high ceiling just because they have to get more offensively dynamic, especially on outside when it comes to receivers. They've given Daniel Jones really not a lot of help on that end, but just super impressive what the Giants have done. And I give them a real shot against Philadelphia just because I think Philadelphia is leaking some major oil now. As for the Vikings, it is what it is. No one thought they were a real contender just with how bad their defense had been this year. That's the thing with Kevin O'Connell, offensive guy. They fired Mike Zimmer, the defensive guy. And of course, the defense starts suffering this year. But, they had a good season, of course, still winning their division. Kirk Cousins, it's that final play. I hate it. You saw this in that game against what's the final game of the season? What was it? Titans versus Jaguars for the division at the end of the season. At the end of the game, if it's fourth and whatever, you got to throw beyond the sticks. And he threw like a 3-down check down. And of course, it gets tackled and then bam, it's over. That's what Kirk Cousins did on that final play. And it's like, give your receiver a chance, man. Come on. What are you doing? When you see that, it just ends the game on such a bummer that way. But it is what it is. I think the Vikings will still be a solid team next year, although it's highly doubtful they will have the same luck in these one-score games. So they have a lot of work to do to shore up the other side of the ball because their offense is good, but defense definitely needs a lot of work. And then the final game of Saturday night, Ravens at the Bengals on NBC. A game that had some people were kind of looking down upon just because the Ravens were going to be without Lamar Jackson again. I'm gonna get into that at the end of this vid. And so without Lamar Jackson, they got Tyler Huntley, and Bengals at full strength for the most part. But I think this game was going to be blowout because Ravens, John Harbaugh always had his team ready to play, and you just figure if a North division matchup, these guys Ravens weren't going back down, and that they did not. In the first half, I thought they had a great game plan and running the ball, keeping the Bengals and that offense, Burrow and chasing them off of the field, and they were definitely doing their thing. And so it's coming down to the second half. You got a nip and tuck game, obviously, and the Ravens were definitely outplaying the Bengals. You were just watching it. It's like, whoa, the Ravens are really taking it to them, to where everyone knows where I'm going with this. If you've seen the game, it's 17-17. Ravens driving down the field, ball at the goal line, essentially, and doing the classic Huntley goes for the over the top, pushing it over, breaking the field type play. And what ends up being, I think, definitely by far this year, the play of the year, it gets pushed out of his hands, lands in the hands of Sam Hubbard, 98 return the other way. It was an unbelievable play to watch. I mean, that's just it was super exciting play. One that's just like, whoa, an amazing swing of events. Because if the Ravens end up getting that touchdown, the way the Bengals offense was playing, how they were getting really kind of shut down, especially watching the fourth quarter. Burrow's usually great QB when it comes down the stretch, but they just weren't getting anything done. It was a super impressive stuff what the Ravens were doing, but obviously that play, the way it went, just a huge swing in the Ravens, they just weren't able to really overcome it. Although at the very end, they had like a fourth and 20, the final play within the last 8 seconds, it almost got caught. One of those plays where it's like a Hail Mary gets batted up, and one of the receivers, I can't remember who it was, had a chance. It just hit off his hand and then dropped it. It was so close. It ended up being a great game, great showcase. And like I said, that play is definitely the play of the season. I will say on that play, though, I'm glad they didn't call that penalty on the Bengals, just because when it comes down to a play like that, I'm talking about it was arguably a push off one of the defenders for the Ravens, or one of the offensive, whoever it was, 89 for the Ravens when they were running down Hubbard. Kind of arguably a push, but it wasn't flagrant enough to where it's like, you know what, just let that play go. That play is just so cool. So yeah, it ended up being really interesting. Although this is another game where the Bengals, not quite to the same degree that the Bills don't have a ton to be proud of when it comes to this game, because like I said, they were kind of a freak play away, a miracle play away from losing this game. Had the Ravens get that touchdown, I think they were going to win the game because they were definitely outplaying the Bengals in this game, surprisingly so. But I think though the Ravens, as they were, are definitely a better team than the Dolphins were in the first game. So Bengals, they got some work to shore up, although their offensive line is really banged up right now. So they might not quite be the same team that they were towards the final half of the season. So we'll see. As for the Ravens, like I mentioned, super impressive what they did without Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, if you were wondering where he was in this game, wasn't on the sideline, wasn't with the teammates, nothing. He had that super weird shit where he had to come out and explain his injuries and whatnot because you knew the heat he was taking and whatnot. And I'm finally glad everyone in the media started calling him out, just saying, dude, what are you doing? It's so obvious what you're doing right here, putting on your team. Um, regard a PCL injury that's taking that everyone in the locker room, you see the sources saying everyone feels like he should have been back by now. So yeah, he felt the heat that he was obviously quitting on the team, which he was. He didn't have the balls to sort of be on the sidelines and sort of be there when he knew he was quitting on the team knew he was quitting on them. It reminds me a lot of that Kawhi Leonard situation in 2018, his final season in San Antonio, where he just was taking longer than he probably should have to come back from that injury, and the team started calling him out on it. Ended up being the relationship, ended the relationship with that franchise, the Spurs, and ended up trading him. Starts to feel the same thing with Lamar Jackson here, man. It's just that you heard it in the coach's interview, the way he was talking about the situation. He was exasperated. You heard Sammy Watkins talk about it. Other sources in the locker room, they've been talking about it. The media is talking about it now. Now the media, you heard on some of the pregame shows on Fox, Sean Payton mentioned, yeah, this just doesn't feel right to me. Same thing with Michael Vick and Charles Woodson. I think everyone sort of realized, yeah, Lamar, you know what you're doing. And the fact that he wasn't on the sideline, it was very Kawhi Leonard-ish, I'll put it that way. So I don't know. It's at the point where obviously would not be surprising if this was his final Baltimore trade sim in the offseason, just because it feels like these contract negotiations are going nowhere. But I'm definitely glad that they acquitted themselves nicely without Lamar Jackson. Probably another reason that the teammates were kind of down on Lamar Jackson now is because when you sit out like that, you're trying to prove a point saying this team sucks without me. And so teammates' reaction to that is like, what the hell? You don't want to be out there with us? You want us to fail? That's kind of how that goes in that kind of situation. It was a situation like that with Le'Veon Bell years ago when he was sitting out. Teammates were calling him out on it or mad at him because it's like, if you're sitting out, you want the team to fail. So that's how the Ravens teammates likely are. And I'm glad people are finally calling out Lamar Jackson on that shit, just because all the shit he's done, his shenanigans, the wanting that ridiculous deal, unrealistic deal, his mommy being his agent is just like, man, fuck this guy. It's too much. But I'm glad the media finally stopped pulling the race card they've been pulling on this and sort of called the situation for what it is. So there you go. So that's my reactions to the games on Wild Card Sunday. Great day of football. The games ended up being very good. Actually, all of them, surprisingly, even the ones that people thought would be a blowout, like the Bills game. And now tonight, we got the creme de la creme, the Cowboys and Buccaneers game, a game that, oh my God, like I said in my preview video a few days ago, going to be the highest rated playoff game of all time. I cannot wait to watch it. So I'll do a reaction to that one when it's done. So that'll do it for this reaction vid for the Wild Card Sunday. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching.